to talk about the polls, and then we'll get back to this. Hello?
Hi. Oh, yeah. I think my mic's on. Hello.
Are you showing us your face? Are you doing a face reveal?
No, my mic's not working. I'll probably do that. If you guys want, I'll do that on the election night stream. But my mic
Wow,
is,
you're just
but no,
fucking teasing us, man.
I went on the. You guys can see on the majority report. But
So you do face reveals on Majority Report, but not here. Got it. Okay, that's
no,
nice.
no. My camera is legitimately whatever. You'll get. I want to drive up interest. It's called business. It's called business. I'm a businessman.
Yeah. Wait, hold on. I gotta respond to my manager real quick. Ettingermentum, everybody. He's gonna give us some updates on poll watch. He's doing poll watch with us for now. We were watching Sam Cedar eviscerate Tim Pool, walking him through the steps. All right. So Texas is a swing state, right? And so is Florida.
No, that's not real. It could have been real. I think it could have been real potentially, but it's not real unless like shit is really massively off. But it's fake. I've been I've been a Blexus denier for a while now,
Yeah.
and this is just me being kind of vindicated there. People like this is something I'll maybe talk about in a bit. But when everybody talks about like the really fast growth that you see in southern states or Sunbelt states as something they just assume that will be great for Democrats. They miss how a lot of that growth is in Chud counties, and it's just resulting in the Chuds getting higher, like vote margins, even if vote like raw margins, even if their net like wins in those counties like decrease. Like there's one county outside of Atlanta that like has grown like 20% in just like the past 3 years, so it already matched its total 2020 turnout, like today just through early voting. And Texas is really ground zero. I don't know if you showed people that study that showed like what the partisanship of the people who are moving to different states were, but it's really crazy. I think like the people moving to Florida are like R plus 40. So it's like Florida actually is more on Wakanda.
Okay. Here's a angry staffer talking about Nate Cohn's new article on polling accuracy. I'm going to get right into it. Basically,
Yeah.
pollsters are terrified of being wrong again, so they're flat out ignoring very blue results. As a result, pollsters are more willing to take steps to produce more Republican leaning results. This is something that we've talked about in terms of like the +2 Republican advantage, like the Republican balancing in every poll, even if
Yeah.
the data is not showing that, like their
Yeah.
own personal data is not showing that, in order to make up for the polling inaccuracies that have occurred because Trump has been consistently, as the great white hope, undermined by our woke liberal pollsters.
Yeah. Trying to demoralize the conservatives from not voting because they always show them down.
Yeah.
That's the story. But yeah, that is a big. Well, the thing with the +2, I don't know if you mentioned this, but a really interesting thing with that for me is that number in a lot of cases comes from a Pew survey that they conducted over like from February to July, where they asked people their partisan leanings. And it's like this huge survey that gets really high response rates. They pay people to respond to it. So it's hopefully it gets a more representative sample and it can represent like how the actual partisanship and what these low info Trump voters what they feel in the survey. And their finding was that like the country has a partisan lean of R+2, like you said. And a lot of pollsters that don't have the money or the time to conduct those kinds of massive surveys have used it as a reference survey. It's called the National Public Opinion Reference Survey. The problem with that survey, it's not like necessarily badly conducted. Pew does a good job usually, but it was conducted while Biden was the Democratic nominee the entire time. So you could very well see this like metric that like a lot of big pollsters are using could be reflecting a political reality that does not exist in the current state of events with Kamala the nominee.
What do you think about the argument that I presented that there is no shy Republican voter any longer in the way that there were in 2016, whereas there are definitely shy Kamala voters, I think, for a multitude of different reasons, including, but not limited to, possible political violence coming their way if they were to openly demonstrate support for Kamala Harris, given how confident Republicans have become in terms of like dishing out violence. Or even just straight up being embarrassed to be in the tank for Kamala Harris, in a similar vein to like being in the tank for Joe Biden, despite like the inevitability that they would have gone and voted for Joe Biden. They did not openly defend Joe Biden. This is vibes-based analysis in general, but I feel like at this stage, given the way the polls are looking, given the
well, at the At
sorry,
the very least, yeah, no, it's fine. At the very least, there is the idea of there having been a silent Republican vote that might not have ever been real. If you look back at what Republican pollsters were saying for like a very long period of time, they had always been accusing pollsters of not like contacting the silent Republicans, or that there was something of a shy Tory effect happening in the U.S. That has like always been the bag of right-wing pollsters. They were saying that back in 2012, and Trump being underestimated in the polls was like the big moment. They're like, oh, see, you guys didn't reach out to real America. And all the liberals being very self-flagellating, just like took that, oh my God, we're so elitist and stupid. We didn't do that. We're awful. We need to change everything. But there's not much evidence that that's really like that. There, it might be the case that they can't reach out to certain kinds of really like low info, just disillusioned anti-establishment Trump supporters. But the idea that Trump supporters are just not saying who they want to vote for because of social stigma. There's not like really evidence of that. There wasn't even like in 2016 we have like the reason why the polls were off because pollsters didn't weight by education. In 2020, a probable reason why they were off then is because the liberals who were staying inside were answering polls at really really high rates, like higher than usual, and it like gave them incorrect sample sizes. So the like neither of those things had anything to do with Trump supporters just being embarrassed of who they vote for. And I think like the idea that that's the case, I honestly comes from like conservatives who like the really elite conservatives live in very blue areas where they're personally embarrassed to admit that they support Trump, and they're transposing that onto the rest of the conservatives who live in areas that are very, very supportive of their beliefs and don't
yeah.
necessarily need to be quiet. And like even the Daily Wire was headed out of LA for like several years. Like these guys have a perspective that is a lot more coastal and elitist than they like to believe.
Um, I agree. I agree with your analysis here. But overall, what are some give us some signs that Kamala Harris is actually doing relatively well in the polls?
Yeah,
That or the performance has been good so far, because on the vibes based front, I do look at like some of the motion from the Trump campaign,
yeah.
whether it be like literally trying to hug and kiss the Arab voting bloc in Michigan. I don't think you do that if you're already confident about like the way that you've presented how
Yeah.
you're going to win every state.
Yeah, because
And
that creates problems when governing, because you have a lot of you would rather have a very cohesive coalition backing you instead of a ton of different groups that all have their different priorities that you may have to abandon and won't be in a good position afterwards. Like, yeah, I would agree with that. That's not something Republican campaigns traditionally do. It is not what you do when you're confident.
yeah, he's stopping by like Arab owned restaurant in Dearborn, Michigan. He's the first candidate to come here this cycle. I asked him why Dearborn. He said he's building inroads with Lebanese and Muslims. Got a warm reception here. Um, and yeah, I mean I think that the Democratic Party has basically carved out the Arab and Lebanese like and Muslim vote in every state, but especially so in Michigan, as
Yeah.
they've activated Richie Torres,
And Bill
AIPAC's
Clinton.
biggest attack dog, to go and give assurances to the Jewish voters in Michigan that they hate Arabs. Don't worry, like.
Yeah,
Uh,
there's not even a huge Jewish population in Michigan. There's a larger, like if you really want to like go that far, you would like probably go to like Georgia where they're like, or Pennsylvania. Like the minority group in Michigan is very much Arabs. Like it's like more, it's like a lot of like what people say about minority outreach, quote unquote, where it's less about like actually reaching out to those groups and more about signaling to the majority population that you're not like president for the minorities.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, like with Bill Clinton as well. But Bill Clinton in North Carolina was also already like a weird person to deploy there. Um,
Yeah,
but then also beyond North Carolina, like sending him to Michigan, um, a state notoriously where the Clintons did not do well last time they were matched up against Donald Trump, and
yeah, or
beyond
Bernie
that, and
Sanders.
beyond that, to go there and just be like, yeah, sorry, Arabs are just like not real humans, and only Israelis are the real humans in this equation. And of course, they're going to want to seek out revenge like it's normal, and
Yeah.
then like repeating Itamar Ben Gvir lines about how that's Judea and Samaria. Like there's no such thing
Yeah,
as the
that was
West Bank.
insane. That
So
was insane. That
so
should go against a lot of what people say about the fucking like Camp David Accords, where they talk about Clinton like he was this honest fucking
yeah,
broker.
yeah,
Like,
or
goodness.
the fucking president, the current president and the vice president running to be president have both said we want a two-state solution. Like
Yeah.
you're literally going against their fake nonsensical bullshit by like you're destroying the veneer of like any sort of peaceful accord in that process. So
Yeah.
I think that I think that the reason why they're doing that is one, because they genuinely don't think that they genuinely do not believe that Arabs are human beings. People from the MENA region are human beings. But like the way that they are publicly communicating this, in my opinion, is more cynical. Me and Uncle Jank have privately corresponded on this. He is of a different mind, where he believes that it's like genuine Democratic Party incompetence. I think it's something a little bit more sinister, where they're, I think, like priming the base to be more like, I think they're trying to offer a permission structure to the base to be like, no, these guys aren't a part of our coalition, actually.
Yeah. And also, like, if you look at like what like the theoretical basis for like a lot of the defections, like the people who say they won't vote for Democrats, like because we need to prove that we're like a wild card who might not be part of who, if they don't like align with our interests, we won't support them. Like similar to like how the Christian right did it in the '90s, where they knew that their best interests were with the Republicans, but like they were willing to take some temporary losses. Obviously, the stakes for them were far lower, like than what like left wing groups in this, because the Democrats in the '90s weren't exactly like anti their interest, but they were able to pressure the Republicans immensely by proving that they were an invaluable part of their coalition, that they could walk if they wanted to. James Dobson, one of like the really huge Christian right like bigwigs at the time, like left the Republican Party outright in 1996, and that terrified the Republican Party, and it created this kind of like the basic kind of back and forth with interest groups like the religious right or with like pro-Palestinian groups, where you kind of have to show like that you're not bluffing when you say you're gonna like defect. Like unions do that sometimes. It's like a basic thing. And what the Democrats are trying to do on their end is they may be trying to specifically win states like Michigan or Georgia, which has a large Muslim population, and Gwinnett County, or like Wisconsin, which also has like a large like even like they have a large Bosnian Muslim community in Milwaukee, I believe. They're trying to prove to these people who are trying to exert pressure on them that we can win with our new coalition of Liz Cheney, like anti-Trump Republicans, that you aren't needed to get victory and that we can do whatever policies we want and you can't pressure us. Because now they might be feeling a degree of heat from the idea that like, oh, we won Michigan by a close margin and there are this many uh, like Democratic voters in Dearborn. And if they can win Michigan without getting large, like losing those cities, losing those demographics, they like will feel like they have all the cards. It's a policy play, not an electoral one. They want to really like relieve themselves of even the perceived pressure that could be on them in the case that they have to rely on these groups.
Yeah. Um, I think that is one aspect of this for sure. And I think the other aspect of this is in the same vein as like their anti-migrant sentiment that they've expressed over and over again, as they've adopted the right-wing framing that immigrants constitute a national security threat, which is directly the opposite of that sort of messaging that the Democratic Party has always championed. That like immigrants are our neighbors, they're our friends, they're people that contribute. And yeah, we'll do some stronger border measures, but that always comes with like a price where we can extract some concessions, right?
Yeah.
They've completely dropped the ball on that, and I think the reason why they're doing that specifically is to prime their base with a to basically decouple Gaza or present Gaza and like American foreign policy or our allegiances to Israel as like only a Muslim thing. I think
Yeah.
that's one other aspect of this, to be like, only Muslims care about this. You don't care about this. See, like,
Hmm.
you also understand, like, if they killed, if your neighbors executed your family members, like, you would also want vengeance too. Um, and I think that's the nefarious aspect of this messaging. I think that it's like very cynical and dare I say even calculated, to be like, to give white people, not just in the suburbs, but like younger
Hmm.
students and black and brown people, the knowledge or the permission to say like, oh yeah, that's just basically like a Muslim thing, and there's a lot more to care about than just this like thing that only Muslims care about, which is not reflective of the poll results in general. And it's no different
Yeah.
than going to the Michigan Jewish population and telling them like, don't worry, we hate the Arabs. Like, there are plenty of Jews. I mean, you're Jewish, but there are plenty of Jews in Michigan and in Pennsylvania and all around that are dedicated anti-Zionists. And beyond
Yeah.
that, Jews who are not anti-Zionist are not voting at the behest of Israel anyway. Like, that's not
Yeah.
their top priority at all. At least in terms of like all the polls I've seen, it's the ninth priority. Now, one might make the argument that it's only the ninth priority in the top 10 priorities because both parties are uniparty in their support for Israel, but it would at least reflect higher in the polling results, despite the uniparty attitude, if this was something that they cared about the most when they are when Jewish voters as a voting bloc are going out to vote and voting by margins like 70% plus towards the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think this is also part of their larger like kind of scheme, like the larger project that they're undertaking, where a lot of Bidenomics, like even the left wing like aspects of it, the spending, the CHIPS Act, the all of these things, it's always couched in the language of national
Yeah.
security, like fighting against China, fighting against Russia. Like it's making America the predominant hegemon in the world. And it's like it's interesting. Like the thing that people have kind of noticed is that the idea of just creating a stronger or fairer economy, these basic liberal justifications for social programs that are supposed to justify themselves, that doesn't really exist. The international conflict, the great power conflict, is at the core of what their project is. And they kind of need, if this is going to sustain itself, they need the only people who care about the negative impacts of war to be specific groups that can be targeted and aren't huge and can be managed. It can't be like a
Yeah.
larger like society defining larger electoral issue like the Vietnam War was. It needs to just be the case that only Ukrainians care about Ukraine, which they like have kind of adopted when they made fun of Trump for being pro-Russia, saying, "Oh, there's so many Ukrainian and Polish voters in Ukraine," not in Ukraine, in Pennsylvania. Uh, it's the idea that these conflicts can be managed with only very minimal uh, political backlash. It's not really something that's even true, but it's more of something they kind of want to manifest for themselves for these overseas commitments to sustain themselves.
Yeah. Um, but going back to it, you have a Truth World poll in front of me right now from
Mhm,
YouGov.
yeah,
Pennsylvania showing +3 for Kamala Harris, Trump at 46, Wisconsin showing +4 for Kamala Harris. This is starting to reflect like the down ballot races. I don't know what the down ballot races look like in these states in this individual poll, but this is starting to catch up to the performance of. This is starting to catch up to the. Wait, sorry. This is starting to catch up to the performance of the state races that are happening in the down
yeah,
ballot races as well, with the exception of Nevada, I guess, and
yeah,
Arizona.
and North Carolina with the governor's race,
And
but that's a
well,
special.
like governors races are different. Not only because like the guy is a person who is openly stated his desires to be a black Adolf Hitler or whatever, but also because
Yeah,
like I think gubernatorial races are oftentimes like more personal, and that's why you have
yeah,
the blue state red governor, red state blue
yeah.
governor dynamic anyway. Um,
Gubernatorial races.
yeah. So
Yeah,
That's
this is a
yeah.
really encouraging set of polls. Not only does it show Kamala up in the states she needs to get 270, plus Nevada and Arizona tied, but even at Trump's states where he's ahead are within the margin of error, and it fits within like YouGov is one of the pollsters. There are three pollsters really that I have an eye out on. Two of them because of their history, and one of them YouGov because they've done something interesting that I mentioned in the article about why the polls could be underestimating Democrats. Um, Marist and New York Times were two pollsters in 2022, which was a year when a lot of pollsters at the very end of the race herded and went hard to the uh, right in like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia. All of those races at the end either showed Republican leads or very like basically tied races. New York Times and Marist both put out a set of Senate surveys um, that showed Democrats leading by about the margins that they won by. So that gives us some trust that they're not only good pollsters, but they are willing to publish results that like aren't based on what they think will be best and are just based on what they see. Marist last night came out with a set of Rust Belt polls that all showed Kamala Harris up after a lot of less trustworthy pollsters who weren't as good in 2022 had it basically tied or a slight Trump lead. YouGov is another interesting one where they're not as high quality historically, but we do know that they have made changes to account for possibly changing response rates where Republicans may be more likely to respond to polls than Democrats. And that's not something we think that other pollsters, we don't know that other pollsters are doing. If we've heard anything like from that Nate Cohn article, it's that pollsters are doing the exact opposite. And YouGov, interestingly, has been one of Kamala's better pollsters this cycle. So like YouGov, we know is like reacting to the response world, the way that the people are actually responding to pollsters in a more realistic and responsive way. Marist, we know, is very strong. And New York Times, I think they'll have their polls out tomorrow morning, and those could be good for Democrats also. If it's not good for Democrats, that would be good for Trump, I think, obviously. But I think specifically from the New York Times, because the New York Times has gotten things right for Democrats when like the rest of the world said no. So yeah, if New York Times puts out a result that's good for Democrats, we can kind of maybe say that there's a gap between what the other pollsters who we can't trust are saying and what the pollsters who we can trust are saying. So, like, it's not as extreme as it was 2 years ago, but it will be pretty noticeable depending on what the New York Times says tomorrow.
So, um, have you been looking at early voting data? Is that something that you care about, or do you think it's just like junk science in general?
It's you have to be very careful about it. I think if I haven't like I've tried to track it in Georgia, which is a state that I know pretty well. Um, uh, Georgia has had like very high early voting rates, and what we've seen there is like both sides have something to be happy about there. The Atlanta area counties that Democrats really need have all turned out at a rate higher than the rest of the state. There have been some northern counties, like in Georgia, who are very Republican that have also had very high turnout rates. I don't think that like it really says anything definitive for either side. It'll probably just come out down to persuasion, but that's worth noting by itself because like that means that it doesn't lean one way or the other. The Nevada stuff is something that I think that's one of the places where you can make some conclusions. And from what I've seen, this year is like unusually strong for Republicans. A lot of that is due to a lot of left-leaning voters registering as independents, kind of like you said, as a possible like silent Kamala voter effect, where younger Democrats aren't as happy with the party or proud of it as right, like right-leaning younger people. And it's become very difficult to tell what goes on in Nevada because of how many young independents there are who aren't registered as Democrats but could be voting for Democrats. Uh, but even if like Nevada is bad for her, we would sort of expect it wouldn't really be the end of the world because it could be a sign of what some pollsters have found that the new realignment is that Republicans are doing better among non-whites and Democrats are doing relatively stronger among white voters. So Trump maybe having a small win in Nevada would be it would maybe a good sign for him in Arizona. But largely, like having a lot of gains with Hispanics doesn't mean all that much in the grand scheme of things in the Electoral College. Most Hispanics live in states like California or Texas or Florida that aren't competitive. So him making gains with those voters won't really impact much outside of those two states. The one exception to this is Pennsylvania, but the Hispanic vote there is largely Puerto Rican, which could be a uniquely difficult demographic for him as a result of a late breaking news story that I think everybody has heard of here.
Yeah, one of the greatest comedians of all time in the
Yeah,
tank. Secret sleeper cell for Kamala Harris, activated by also secret sleeper cell for Kamala Harris, Joe Rogan. We're talking, of
yeah,
course, about Tony Hinchcliffe's Trash Island comments.
yeah. They're
Um,
gonna kill Tony in real life if that ends up happening.
yeah. So, I mean, the only counter to that I would present to you is basically this. I'm gonna do a screen
Yes,
sharing here.
this is the greatest song of all time.
Yeah. You have no answer for this. Liberals have no
No,
answer for this.
this made Florida a red state single-handedly.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, the Democratic Party has no answer for this. All they have is like lib shit where they bring like a bunch of Broadway musical stars to get together and be like, you should vote. Voting is good. Like,
Yeah,
this
this
is,
made Florida single-handedly into more on Wakanda. It was
yeah,
one of those powerful videos in history.
it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It is like liberals say Tim Kaine in the membrane. Republicans say I will vote for Donald Trump. And, you know,
Mhm.
this is the reason why there's like a 20-point swing in young Hispanic men, I think, to the Republican Party and nothing else.
Did you see that poll that came out like 2 hours ago
Yeah, the
among
Florida
Puerto
one.
Ricans? Yeah, the Puerto
Yeah.
Ricans one.
The Puerto Ricans one is really funny. It's like 85% Kamala Harris, 8% Donald Trump.
That's so real. That happened. I live there.
Yeah, I
So she's
don't.
gonna. It's like gonna be her. She's gonna get 90% of the vote among Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, I don't. I don't know if that's. I don't know if
No,
that's
it's
going to
real.
happen, but
It
yeah,
happened.
it is.
I was there.
It is pretty funny. Harris
Yeah.
85%. UCF poll of Puerto Rican voters from Florida. Harris 85%. Trump 8%. Um, it's obviously ridiculous and it's not real, but
No, it
this
is real.
puts into context like the Rick Scott statements about how much he hates Tony Hinchcliffe and how much he loves Puerto Ricans.
It's so cool. Rick Scott learned Spanish to appeal to these people. He has
Yeah,
put in so much fucking work. It could all be destroyed by like Joe Rogan's like 12th like favorite Austin area comic just being a complete fucking moron on the national stage. But this is real. I don't care if it's 150 people who were surveyed. It's real. It happened. I was there.
yeah. You were one of the 150 surveyed. I like
Yeah.
that they just asked people on the street. Like
Yeah.
they just went to a store. It's like the Fox News barbershop
Yeah.
Fox News barbershop focus groups where everyone suspiciously is incredibly pro Trump at the
Yeah.
one barbershop that they went to.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, you were there. You were polled. You're one of the 8%
Yeah.
saying no. I'm staying true to Donald Trump. I will vote
Yeah.
for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So you're saying that that the method of like taking away right wing former Republican voters who are just like grossed out by Donald Trump, a successful method for Joe Biden is also going to be successful for Kamala Harris, and that she is not going to hemorrhage enough of the base in the urban districts
Yeah.
to she's going to make up for that in areas
I
that it
mean,
matters.
it's possible. That's kind of what a lot of them did in 2022. It's what happened in 2020 to a smaller degree. There was poor turnout in like places like Philadelphia and small rightward swings in inner city Atlanta compared to past elections. And Democrats won through historic margins off of the suburbs. That's a coalition that I think the people at the top of the party would very much like to see cemented. it's a winning coalition in a lot of these states, especially when they are given an assist by uh, like the right being insane. But that doesn't mean that I think it was the ideal strategy. I think the best way to say that they effectively, if like they do win off of this and they get the slight wins in the like the Great Lakes states, and they maybe like pick up North Carolina or Georgia off of the suburbs there, like, and they like end up winning the election, it'll be effectively executing a bad long-term strategy, because the lack of the kind of hyper reactiveness and the lack of any kind of forceful effort to push their own ideas is just not something that works well in the long term. And if you want any proof of that, you can see like how the right has changed the politics of immigration. If they did what the Democrats are doing now, like 10 years ago, they would have been completely capitulating. That was back when there was a consensus around immigration reform and like giving amnesty. That would have they would have never done what they did over the past 8 years, where they moved all of the politics of this to the right and got basically everything that they wanted. It's not as immediately successful as just kind of trying to play catch up to every focus group says. But if you have the right kind of position, or if you even have a wrong position, just pushing your argument in a way that looks trustworthy can both work immediately and like work a lot better for you long term. Like Democrats did that with healthcare under Obama. They like took some major political hits for it, but they ended up redefining what the consensus is. Even now, Republicans won't like say that they even want to repeal Obamacare. Like
Or when
just
Mike
by
Johnson accidentally lets it
yeah,
slip that he wants to repeal Obamacare, Donald Trump, who ran on repealing Obamacare in 2016, has to be like, I've never done that. I've never wanted to repeal
yeah,
Obamacare. I love Obamacare. That's crazy.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like part of it is just
Or
getting
the
lucky
CHIPS
with the way
Act, which apparently
yeah,
Mike Johnson also spoke out of turn on that as well at a campaign stop in Syracuse to boost Representative Brandon Williams. Speaker Mike Johnson says he would consider repeal of the CHIPS and Science Act, which will deliver billions to Micron to make semiconductors in clay.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, just even stuff like that that was like previously like seen as a bit out there. It's now the consensus because you're not Democrats aren't capitulating on every single thing. Like, I mean, you could say with the economy, where they, I would say, even in some cases, foolishly tried to press an advantage on it for a year with Bidenomics. Um, uh, they've ended up really cutting down the Republican advantage on that. Trump's lead on the economy is barely like it's only a point or two. It used to be very, very high.
I think
And
I think the reason
yeah,
for that is different though. I think the reason for that is because of Trump more so than
yeah,
like the opportunity economy messaging that we've heard from Kamala Harris. I think
yeah,
that the
yeah,
real reason for that is because he's so hyper focused on immigration, and that much
yeah.
is like
And
demonstrated by the
trans stuff.
fact, yeah, he thinks that
Yeah,
that's like his answer to everything. And even his own, like, obviously his own staffers are telling him like, talk about the economy, you fucking idiot. And he
yeah,
then will go up. He'll then go up on stage, and his only answer is tariffs, which I think
yeah,
the Harris campaign effectively communicated as a like a broad sales tax, which is
yeah.
smart.
I
It is,
like that. I think that I saw polling that said that was like the most effective message
yeah.
that they could have,
Eh,
and it's I think it's breaking through a little bit because people just assume Trump. Oh, he's the economy guy, he knows what he's doing. But when his one idea is fucking talking about William McKinley, it like really kind of dampens that a little bit. It'd be better if he just shut up about it.
Yeah, that there's a bunch of other factors like the economy seemingly improving over the course of the past couple of months, but also I think more importantly is Trump's hyper focus away from the economy and constantly talking about abortion. Like we saw that, I mean not abortion, sorry, constantly talking about
Trans
immigration,
stuff.
which we saw in the debate. Like he literally, that was a
Yeah, yeah,
massive flub for him, and he hasn't learned the lessons from that and keeps doing that over and over again. Uh, and and I think that's the reason why Kamala Harris is like caught up, not because of her good messaging,
yeah,
but because
yeah.
of Trump's bad messaging on that front.
It's
And
still like any messaging at all is better than what they're doing in immigration. Ideally, I think they would have pushed really hard on economics from the beginning, and specifically healthcare. Like, I think the big missed opportunity for Kamala, like at like at the beginning of their campaign, she should have stuck with being pro Medicare for all. I think that could have like made a huge difference.
yeah, that, oh my God, that would be, well,
Because it's
that,
popular, it would have raised the salience of a really important thing where Democrats have an advantage. It would have made her look consistent and different from Biden. It would have been like solved a ton of problems just at once.
Yeah, that's well, she packaged that. She did the lightest version of that. She didn't even do the Sherrod Brown method of being like, we're gonna lower the age of Medicare to 55. And instead
Yeah.
went with the we're gonna increase Medicare for at-home care. Like
Yeah.
it
I
was
see.
the most
Yeah.
like focus tested, most like hyper specific way that she could do that. And even then, it's like a successful communication strategy according to Blueprint. Here's the perception of tariffs when it comes to tariffs, meaning tax on goods imported into America, which comes closer to your view. For swing state voters and all swing state swing voters and swing state all voters, the U.S. should not impose tariffs on all goods. Tariffs are just another word for a national sales tax. That's plus 39. The
Yeah.
U.S. should impose automatic tariffs of 10% to 20% on every U.S. trading partner, 60% on goods from China, and rates as high as 100%, 200%. This would punish companies for shipping jobs overseas and create more jobs in the U.S. 41% for all swing state voters, minus 41%.
Yeah, they should have probably pressed like why that would be insane like earlier on. But this does reflect something that I have heard people say, which is that the makeup of the undecided voters are a lot more favorable to Democrats than Republicans, which could be like kind of a like supposedly that's the one thing the Kamala campaign is bragging about now, where they're like saying, "Oh, we have the last people are breaking our way because of the Puerto Rico stuff." I think that could be real. And yeah, this guy runs Blueprint. It is a campaign thing for Democrats.
Yeah. It's a campaign thing for Democrats, but like, I mean, they're not so in the tank. I mean, I guess they're in the tank because they don't talk about Gaza, but they're not so in the tank that they don't like they don't necessarily, I mean, they obviously do a good enough job because they will show like what some of Kamala Harris's like breakaway points are that perform very well, and what Kamala Harris's like most underperforming points are, which is of course when she says like she loves small businesses or that she is a small business and that she hasn't done anything different than Joe Biden and she won't. Like they
The
do
small business stuff is
yeah, they
just
do
like kind
openly
of
say that
baffling.
that's like, you know, poison for the campaign.
Yeah.
But
It was just the price gouging shit that worked. And look, you can see at the top there, this is Hassanism being proven. Real existing Hassanism is like the price gouging shit is by far the most like
yeah.
beneficial thing there.
Yeah, and they've you know seemingly moved away from that for some weird reason.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues with the way that they communicate on this campaign, but I still stand on the idea that it is because like Trump is also running an objectively poor campaign and he has a lot less room, like he has a lot less wiggle room in terms of like doing bad messaging because of the fact that he had already maxed out his name recognition. And I think that there are way smaller groups that he can tap into, like way smaller constituencies that he can build a coalition off of.
Yeah.
And one of the most consequential parts of that, of course, and I keep repeating this over and over again, and I wonder if you agree with me or not, but it's the low and mid propensity voters and their likelihood to go out and vote. I think like for men under the age of 35, if you were to just like go around and talk to people in our age group,
Yeah.
I think that there is probably more there are more pro Trump, like overtly pro Trump people than there are people who are overtly Kamala Harris. And
Yeah.
I say this as someone who lives in California in like one of the deepest, bluest fucking areas in West Hollywood, Los Angeles. And even then, there are a shit ton of people who are very openly pro Trump. The problem
Yeah.
is most of those podcast guys, they're not voting. They don't know how to vote. They don't care to vote. And I don't think that Trump has also, like, I think ironically, Trump has done harm reduction arguments to capture the attention of those guys, but nothing that like he normally would do, which is, or normally Republicans would do, which is like at least hammer on a wedge issue that actually is enough for them to go out and vote. Like he hasn't offered them anything. He just talks about how shitty Kamala is. And he thinks that like being the macho guy to Kamala Harris being like a dumb broad is going to be enough for a lot of these guys to not smoke weed that morning while they're listening to their fucking favorite podcast and go out and
Yeah.
vote.
Yeah, we haven't I mean, early voting data is whatever, and you can make an argument that on election day, because these guys are fucking stupid, don't know about early voting and they're going to go out on the day that there's voting. But there are some states that track how often voters vote, and they track if a voter has voted in the past 4 elections or if they haven't voted at all and they're new voters. And we have seen, I mean, from what I've seen, I may be missing something, that there isn't really much of a difference between how many new voters are like Republicans or Republican aligned and how many of them are Democrats. It's basically split as you would kind of expect. I think in Georgia, which is one state where they have made a big deal of trying to get like these low propensity voters out, of the voters who haven't voted in past elections and are voting now, most of them are like they're more non-white than the state at large, which is how it usually is. We're not really seeing any difference in trends, and at least so far, there isn't really any proof of a low propensity like bro surge for Trump.
Yeah. I mean, like it's a risky it's high risk for Donald Trump, but he doesn't have anything else is the way I
Yeah,
see it. Like I don't
I
think
think
he
he could
can
have done.
he
I
could have
think,
had a pathway towards like rebuilding the moderate coalition
yeah,
by using the wipeout method after he got shot at and then like, did the unity route.
yeah.
But it was impossible for him to do that. He's just like he's so invested in like being a fucking weirdo that he immediately was like, "Nah, we're against Joe Biden. We're going to win anyway." And so we should get a base pick with JD
Yeah, Vance
Vance.
is huge here. Vance is huge. Not even just in the ways where he's like literally in like conservative election Twitter group chats with teenagers, but like is in the big thing with Trump that I don't think his people understood and could I think explains why he's done better than a lot of Republicans running for Senate is that he is seen now as qualified in the way that he wasn't seen in 2016. He's seen as like a stronger leader in a number of areas. So, and that was the thing that people really liked about him above Biden at the end of Biden's campaign. Biden was seen as inept, and Trump was seen as this experienced leader who had done it before and had a better presidency than Biden had had. But you can't, like, by picking a guy who was 39 years old when you selected him, has been in the Senate for 1 year, and was a blogger for like most of his career, you are turning what should have been a strong point for your campaign, especially against someone like Kamala, who is not well known and doesn't have a lot of experience. She's only been in statewide office for like 14 years at this point. They made that into a huge problem for them in a way where it could have been a big strength. They picked Rubio or Youngkin or something.
Yeah. Um but yeah, okay, so we're looking at early voting in swing states from yesterday where women are outperforming the men. This has seemingly been something that is terrifying for the Republicans in general.
Yeah,
Um
yeah, it's
this
it's kind of what you'd expect. It's not too different from 2020. Like it's not good for them. I'd say that. Like the Georgia gap is pretty big. Women are kind of carrying really hard here.
Yeah. Now, do we think that this is a direct Roe v. Wade impact, or is this just that like women do have a tendency to vote early, vote often, vote?
Yeah, women vote more in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because like the point here is that this is in line with 2020. But the thing with 2020 is that 2020 was a year where Democrats were very, very likely to vote early and Republicans, because they were told it was fraud, didn't vote early. And now there's kind of a depolarization of voting methods compared to 4 years ago, where Democrats who voted early in 2020 because they didn't want to get COVID by mail or plan to vote on election day now, or Republicans who didn't vote early in 2020 because they thought it was fraud or fine with voting for it now. We've seen in Georgia there's a big segment of people like because they track if somebody voted on election day or if they voted early 4 years ago. There is a couple 100,000 people who voted on election day in 2020, and they are overwhelmingly white compared to the rest of the state. Uh, and that has made the overall voting a little whiter compared to 2020. So you would expect with a more Republican early voting group compared to 2020 and like a lot of voters who were Republicans who are voting early now who didn't vote early 4 years ago, um, you would expect there to be more men voting. But even among these groups, oh wow, even among these groups that like this pool of voters that you would think would lead to more men voting, you have the splits are roughly the same. So that could point towards a largely more female, uh, like turnout, largely more female share of the electorate, in a couple days. Although, like again, like you can't like take a lot from the early stuff. It's just
Yeah.
something I thought of.
Final Detroit Free Press poll of Michigan says Harris up by 3 overall. Harris up by
Yeah.
4 points with independents. Harris grew her lead with black voters by 18 points since August. Harris grew her lead with women by 5 points since August. I think it
Yeah,
comes
this is
down
big.
to is this wrong? I'm asking you, but like I think it comes down to white women in general. Like the way that they
Yeah.
have strategized on this is that like they believe that white women are by majorities going to go to the Democratic Party, unlike what has happened in the past. And
Yeah,
the
the
way I see it is, if
November.
that doesn't happen, if white women don't pull through, um, if white women don't go by majority of the Democratic Party, then their chances are I mean they're not. It's not looking too good.
Yeah, well, I mean, they did win in 2020 without winning a majority of white women, I think. But like the white women did get more Democratic from 2016 to 2020, and if you're expecting minorities to become more Republican this
Did
year,
it?
you're
I
going to
thought it went
want
from
that.
52 to 55. I thought that they went by larger majorities
Oh,
to Donald Trump. I think it went from 52 to 55%, but that was
oh,
pre Roe v. Wade.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that yeah, I think there was like a lot of that was because Trump got a higher vote share with nearly every single demographic group in 2020 compared to 2016 because of lower third party voting, except for white men. White men were the only demographic group in the entire country that actually had a lower share for Trump than they did for Hillary. But like when he ran against Hillary. So like that's something people like forget. Like white men arguably did win Biden the election, but yeah, they're gonna want like ideally in the post-Roe world and the world where they're losing minority voters to Republicans, they're gonna have to make up with that with women, especially white women. And the Detroit Free Press poll here is something I think you can trust because they had terrible numbers for Biden back in the spring, back in uh, like earlier this year. They had him down by 7, I think, in a poll in January. And what I always found interesting with that was that the same poll tested Trump against Whitmer, and they found him among the same survey where he led Biden by 7. He was losing to Whitmer by 5. So to me, it was always proof that there is a big demographic of people in states like this. Back when Biden was in the race, I was always saying that there are people who do want to vote for a Democrat against Trump, but don't want to vote for Biden because he's too old. Kamala is a bit of a wild card here because she's so connected to him, but she could do it maybe. Um, and we see here that she has largely accomplished this, according to this poll. She has gotten those voters who were willing to vote for Democrat, weren't willing to vote for Biden. She's gotten them back. And Detroit Free Press poll is really like important here because these guys nailed 2022 in Michigan. Glenn Glariff also nailed 2022 in the state. They had her up by 3 also. And if she's winning Michigan by 3 points, usually the way Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania correlates pretty closely. Michigan is slightly more Democratic, but not overwhelmingly so. And if these polls end up being right, she should be in a strong position to win those 3 states that she needs,
So
in my
your
opinion.
final analysis is that the blue wall remains strong.
I would say I think that Wisconsin is definitely a little trickier than uh, Michigan is because it's a bit more rural. The Marquette poll having her up by 1 there was a big result for her. We're going to have a poll of Iowa by Selzer for the Des Moines Register. She's historically like freakishly accurate, and the results in Iowa can correlate with results in Wisconsin. So I want to see what she says and on Sunday before coming to any analysis with that. Pennsylvania is probably the weakest link here. Good polls have showed her up. More mediocre polls have showed a tide race or her down. She's very much in the game at the very least. And but I think really puts her in a better position than Trump, is that Trump's position, according to high quality polling in Georgia and North Carolina, is not as strong as I think a lot of forecast models are saying. I think that those states are very much in the question, which he doesn't want to be the case because like he would want to be in a position where he just needs to win one of three of the Great Lakes states to win. He does not want to be in a position where he needs to win three of three of Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania to win.
Trump plus 68, Dawson County, Georgia early voting turnout officially surpasses the 2020 turnout. This is, I think, one of the first counties in the country to do so in terms of
It's
early.
very, very fast growing county. Dawson County has like grown very rapidly since 2020. Its population has gone up 20% since over the past couple of years. So that's mostly a consequence of the more people live there.
Wait,
To
but
40
that's
years ago.
like, but is it, but it's plus 68, but does that like, is it plus 68 in favor of like all the people that are migrating into Dawson County? Are they?
That was the previous result in 2020. We don't know how the new voters are voting.
I was about to say that because usually migration patterns, especially in Georgia, look like it's not Republicans, it's Democrats moving into Georgia.
Yeah. And the case with Dawson is that it's just north of Atlanta, about an hour drive. Very beautiful scenery at the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, and a lot of older people who live in the Atlanta area are moving there just to retire. So a lot of the people moving to that area could be Democrats who are just like older now and want to live in a nice looking place. Very beautiful area right next to Lake Lanier.
Yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to ask you. So there's a fascinating analysis from the New York Times. Partisanship of migration patterns in major battlegrounds. Arizona has seen a plus 26 Republican. Georgia, on the other hand, has seen plus 12 Democrat. Michigan plus 12 Democrat. Nevada plus 3 Republican. North Carolina plus 2 Republican. Pennsylvania plus 17 Democrat. Wisconsin plus 17 Democrat. And that, of course, is Florida with a plus 40 Republican and Texas with a plus 20 Republican.
Yeah, that's real. I believe that so much. That is like exactly what you were seeing. And this could be the reason why the Republican Electoral College advantage may not exist anymore, because all of their voters who lived in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin got annoyed after they elected Democratic governors and they thought they were living under COVID tyranny. And they all moved to Texas and Florida, which were advertising themselves as like the states where liberty still lives. And they ended up just making those states big vote sinks for Republicans. They didn't net them any electoral college votes and just left the remaining, like they left the people behind to be more Democratic on net. Georgia is a bit different there. I think that's probably just a case of us being the place where northeasterners like moving to, because Florida's gotten so hot.
I think Georgia also is like I mean, it's work related too. No, like it's becoming more diverse. There are job opportunities. Hollywood moving there as well, I think, plays a role in this too. Like the tax benefits that like production gets. It's like become mini Hollywood basically.
Minnesota also, I think, being plus 42 Democratic. A lot of this might have to do with housing prices, because in Illinois, I think, is up there plus 41 Democratic. The Midwest, these cities in the Midwest, like Chicago, Minneapolis, have very low housing prices. So a lot of younger professionals in Ohio is plus 1 here compared to other red states. A lot of this could be younger professionals moving to these places with like not insanely expensive housing, but aren't super conservative. And like it just creates a different kind of trend environment compared to what the stereotypes of these states have been.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, any final message that you wanna give our audience here? Ettingermentum is going to be the Zoomer Steve Kornacki for election night.
Yeah, we're going to like be sharing screen, and I'll be going through all the counties and everything.
Yeah.
I have all the places to look at mapped out. But I have an article that I published about, like I have an article that I published last week that goes through like a model that my friend has made that incorporates like something that no other forecaster. I'm going to have a map on Monday. I'm going to publish it the day before the election. I'm currently working on 2 Art of Losing pieces, both for Trump and Kamala. So when I say shit after the election, people won't say I'm just saying it for convenience. I'm going to have those are going to be coming out this weekend, or maybe the Trump one could be tonight. And I'll have my final map on Monday. I want to get the final New York Times polls and the Seltzer poll out before I put out my final opinions. But I will say that, like, if it was the way that it is now, I would have Kamala at the very least up in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We'll see what the New York Times poll says. But the Marist one did increase my confidence. But you guys will see how much confidence I have in each state on Monday, and you can see my analysis of why polling may not be correct, and what you can learn from the special election indicators and primary indicators on my site, Ettingermentum.news, on Substack, and on my Twitter. Thanks for having me on. I'll see you guys in a couple days.
Thanks. All right, that was Ettingermentum, folks. You can check out his Substack. Taking a vacation Wednesday to be a EU frog watching election with you all night. Y'all are fucking crazy.